So it's time to enter our panel discussion, but please let me first thank the speakers with the great presentation and the opportunity to hear from them the amazing work they are including in. So definitely congratulations. And since we are welcoming 3 additional experts, while, I have a few questions for the speakers so far, I will, refrain. While welcoming these 3 additional experts, it's nice to see you. I will then not only welcome you, but also ask whether you have any particular question you would like to raise, to the colleagues. Thank you. So any question?
I had a question. I think this is Felix. I had a question for Rachel, and yeah, I really love your presentation. And part of it is because you and I was with PTN, a few years ago, and so it's kind of nice to see all the good things that PTN has done. One of the questions that I had was, how do you decide which drug to choose? And I think that's one of the questions that I've heard from others.
Thank you, Felix. It's great to see you again. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. So I, in response to your question, there is a system by which NICHD helps to prioritize the molecules on the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act list. So the BPCA prioritization list is developed and reviewed, I believe, annually to ensure that that the list includes drugs with the highest clinical need, as well as feasibility for study. And so that list is available and it's generated. Anyone can submit ideas for drugs to add to the list and rationale. And those ideas are reviewed and prioritized by experts and stakeholders as identified by NICHD. And then that list is prioritized and published. And that is really what guides the Pediatric Trials Network, as our existence is because of the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act. So we are beholden to be looking at that list and choosing molecules on that list. Now it's a long list, so we have to take into account many different factors when selecting what drugs to study. Some of it is related to we need to have, because our metric for success is FDA label changes, there has to be a clear pathway for the particular molecule that we choose to study to be able to have a label change. So in some situations where it's a completely new indication in the pediatric population, for example, and we would need multiple studies to get there, we only have a certain amount of resources. So we have to think about, weighing those and balancing those, advantages and disadvantages of studying particular molecules. But it is, I guess the general answer to your question is the BPCA prioritization list, followed by sort of what is feasible within the bounds of our resources.
So, sorry, I also have I have a comment really for Rachel and then a question for Leila. And I just wanted to say that I was really excited to see the list of drugs that you have, because one of the things that, we've been trying to do this year is, my area of expertise is PBK modeling. Many of the drugs that you have, we already have models for. And so I think Alice showed a nice example of, obviously, the verification steps and trying to get to the point where we have a robust model so that we're confident going forward and predicting exposures in vulnerable patients. But, and that's why I was really interested and excited to see your list of drugs and in fact, excited to see the data. I understand that it's an ongoing project, but very interested in any follow-up, how we can find out as much, information as possible, because I think, one of the really important things here is to have the right people at the table. I mean, it was interesting from Leila's, presentation that, there are many different aspects here. It's getting industry on board, getting regulators, getting clinical trial, but also, I mean, modeling has been mentioned a number of times today, but I mean, how do we get people to be confident enough to actually adopt the modeling approaches going forward? So before I move on to Leila, sorry, I promise I'll make this brief. So what is your perspective on modeling then? I mean, has that been factored into the trial design at all? Could you speak to that before then I go and ask the second question?
And your question is for me, right?
Yes. So my question is for you, and then
Okay.
I wanted to actually address a similar question to Leila. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, actually, we are very interested in our Pharmacometrics group. Is based at Duke Clinical Research Institute, where I am. But then we work with partners, generally in academic centers in various places across the country, and on the modeling, particularly in to understand our results. But we have some groups that are very interested in the PBPK approaches, as you mentioned. Now we have, there's one example I can think of in particular for remdesivir, where we did an approach we did some modeling to try to predict dosing for children based on what we understood about the adult exposures, and that so we have done in the Pediatric Trials Network sponsored those activities, really before we had much data in children. So now I think we are certainly interested in modeling, and whatever we can do to decrease the need for substantial enrollment in clinical trials, decrease participant burden, decrease cost, I think we are supportive of. So I think we should connect offline if you have particular thoughts about how we, there ideas for collaboration or things that we could explore.
Okay, that sounds great. And sorry, may I be cheeky and just ask one more question, and then I'll keep quiet. Sorry, just to Leila, really. So Leila, you mentioned that modeling, again, was discussed during the FDA workshop. I mean, again, what do you think the adoption is going to be there? Is there, what was the understanding? What was the take-home message, I think, from the FDA with respect to modeling, other than we've got to do more? I mean, is there a confidence in it?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Karen. Thanks for the question. I think that it's an area of interest to FDA. It's really expanding in the area of pregnancy, and so definitely a lot of interest. And so I think in terms of moving forward, I think that sponsors or investigators need to, submit whatever they're proposing. I think, to get going on this, right, we need to have the experience. So FDA is definitely interested in this area.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I may, although not a specialist, in the domain, but I can tell you that over the last 10 years, we've seen, the use and acceptance of quantitative approaches increasing. And there was also mention of the fact that in between pediatrics and development of drugs in pregnancy, there are lots of similarities. And remember that the use of quantitative approaches, modeling and simulation has, increased with pediatric drug development. In a way, pediatric drug development has benefited of those methods. And if, we've been in a way successful with the topic that was presented at ICH and detailed by Leila, which is the inclusion of pregnant and breastfeeding individuals in clinical trials. In a way, it's because it's the right time to move this forward and to benefit of those methods that will, of course, benefit the patient moving forward. So this is why, I'm convinced, of the value of those methods. And this is also why, in the at ICH again, you heard yesterday from Dr. Yao from the FDA that in the ICH E11A pediatric extrapolation guideline, there are details on the use of modeling and simulation methods, to be used, that can be used and that are useful for pediatric drug development. Yeah, thank you.
This is John van den Anker. I'm the one of the third of the additions to the panel. I enjoyed very much the presentations, and I think we need to learn from the experience. The PDN has been very successful. They went to a slow start, so to say, but they have all their things in a correct row. We know that PBPK modeling, POP-PK modeling, POP-PK-PD modeling should be part of the standard. It's a tool that is needed to do these things. The question I have, and it's primarily probably for Leila, for me it's a déjà vu. We had pediatrics, then we had newborn babies, and now we have pregnant women and their fetuses, or pregnant individuals and their fetuses. How is the FDA going to use the experience from pediatrics and neonatology to make things even easier to progress in the pregnant individuals and their fetuses? So I'm just curious, because we learned so much in the last decades that it would be a pity to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yes, I think that there's definitely a lot of lessons to be learned from pediatrics, and right, we don't want to recreate the wheel. I think that there may be certain differences in terms of the lack of requirements to do these types of studies, and so in the maternal health space, I think there may be additional challenges to try to get these studies done, right? Which is different than the pediatric space. But we certainly, in all of our efforts, this is why we come to these meetings and engage with our stakeholders to try to get the field moving forward in the space of maternal health and getting these studies forward. So it's great that we're having these conversations, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this meeting and learn from the pediatric experience. And so yeah, I think that in the last session there was some comments related to doing studies in pediatrics, for example, for long-acting antiretrovirals, and is there an interest in getting these types of data in pregnancy? So I think similar kinds of thinking applies to pregnancy as well. So if there's new products that are being developed that have some kind of therapeutic advantage, or innovative products that are being developed, well, then yes, there is an interest then to also conduct studies in pregnancy as well, because why shouldn't pregnant individuals, why shouldn't they have access to these new products that are being developed that may have therapeutic advantages, et cetera. So I think that a lot of the lessons learned from pediatrics are also applicable to to maternal health.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leila. These were great, comments and definitely showing the value of this type of discussion, the opportunity to bring, all the stakeholders together to listen to one another, to share experience learning. And this is quite important, definitely. So you mentioned also in your presentation the need to educate some of the stakeholders, meaning the need to share information. And what you were saying with regard to pregnant individuals is something we heard more than once in pediatrics, meaning to protect them by research and not from research. So this is definitely an important message. And by the way, Leila, could you please tell us what is your plan for the future, the near future, following the great workshop you organized earlier this year?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Solange, for those comments, and thanks for the questions. So as a follow-up to the PK and pregnancy workshop that we held in May, we are involved in some activities. So we're currently working on a proceedings paper that we plan to publish as a manuscript in a special edition in the Journal of Clinical Pharmacology that is going to be dedicated to pregnancy PK. So a lot of the external stakeholders who participated in that meeting were invited to write a manuscript in their area of expertise. So I know, well, you were part of the planning committee, Solange, so I don't know if you offered to write a manuscript. I don't know if you are writing one, but there may be others who are part of this meeting who may be in the process of writing a manuscript. So I think that's a really great special edition that we're looking forward to. I think the tentative publication date for that is sometime in the spring of 2023. So additional activities, I guess, follow up to that PK pregnancy public workshop is that we're also actively working on revising the 2004 pregnancy PK guidance. So that's an active project that we're working on. And then I guess the ICH guideline that was mentioned. So I guess we have you to thank, Solange, for, I guess you were one of the, I don't know if you were the person who brought forward or proposed that the topic of pregnant and breastfeeding individuals to ICH. And so ICH, I guess, so I guess you worked with FPA and to bring that forward as a proposal, and it was endorsed by ICH, and so I guess it was put forward in collaboration with EMA, but there's also broad support by FDA and other global regulatory agencies. So I think that's an exciting development that we look forward to working on over the next several years, and so I think it's a great platform for stakeholders to collaborate on this really important topic and to try to get some alignment globally moving forward. So I think, so thank you. Appreciate all your efforts, Solange, in this area, in this space. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Leila, and also thanks to the colleagues that have supported me in this endeavor. And I was glad to not only have the support of the FPA colleagues, but also the support of the regulators, as you mentioned, since the topic was proposed to ICH jointly with the European Medicines Agency, but definitely with the effective and strong support from the FDA and also MHRA. Knowing, of course, what you mentioned with regard to your activities, this cluster meeting you've initiated, and it's good to see that the UK MHRA is back to ICH despite Brexit. So this was decided in June this year by ICH, and this is definitely great news. Knowing also all the activities they are, having at MHRA with regard to this particular topic. So definitely, again, showing the value to collaborate and the value to connect the dots. That's for sure. Yeah. Great. With that said, if no additional question from the three colleagues that joined the panel, then let me raise a question to Anna Grazia. So Anna Grazia, I understand you cannot enable your video.
No, it seems to be disabled by the host, so I cannot open. I'm sorry for that, but I cannot do anything on my side. So
yeah. Okay, no worry. Of course, it would have been great to see you, and we appreciated the presentation you gave, and also it's
maybe but we need to how to change the sides. I don't know what happened. Okay.
Oh,
perfect.
Great.
Many thanks.
Welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so congratulations for the good work you've been doing so far. And it's quite interesting. And I'm just wondering, of course, this is something which is somewhat Europe specific. Knowing, of course, your relationship with the Council of Europe. And I'm just wondering whether you could clarify what will be the next step in this for this guide and for you leading TEDdy, the TEDdy network.
Yes. So it's for sure that is an European initiative, but a large European initiative, because it includes 46 countries and not 27 as in the case of the European Union. But we have to say that the guide has been released for consultation to selected stakeholders. The consultation is open until the 18th of November. We will then implement comments and proposals received into the guide the next month. The revised guide agreed by the member of the working group will be presented to the Council of Europe steering committees for human rights in the field of biomedicine and health, and the steering committee of the rights of the child of the Council of Europe before summer. And we hope that finally it will be approved from the Council of Europe 46 countries representatives in autumn 2023. Importantly, we have to underline that the principle and consequent good practices included will constitute in a way the official interpretation of the principle contained in the International Convention of the Council of Europe. And these are also compliant with the provision of the International Conventions of the Right of the Child that has been ratified not only by 46 but more countries. So that's why it's in a way an initiative at international level and a guide that to be considered in a international perspective.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Of course, there's always the need to look at the big picture.
Yes.
Knowing, of course, the developers are, most often used to develop for global purpose. So clearly, this will be of help. And what are you planning to disseminate, all this information, this guide, once endorsed by the Council of Europe?
It's for sure that we need to carry out a campaign to release this guide, and that's why it is very important that stakeholders engage in the revision of the guide, have a key role to play to implement then the guide. What is important to underline also is that to ensure the participation of children in decision-making process in health is not really a children's rights. Is really a priority, a political priority of the Council of Europe and of the European Commission. So that's why the next step, the thinking is to include these topics or activities related to this topic in European funded projects and initiatives. Of course, we need, I can say these guidelines is a starting point. And after, it's up to the stakeholders to implement them, take into account that in many cases, their countries have ratified the convention. So they need to implement the interpretation of this principle in their daily practices. So this is an important point to take in mind. That's why it's not, in a way, it's not a compulsory text, but is an interpretative text that should be taken in mind. Also considering that right now it's very a priority for the future activities to be put in place in the health field. That means healthcare and research.
That's quite interesting. Don't you think that there would be value for you to connect with the expert group that is currently, revisiting the guideline, the ICH guideline on good clinical practice?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that you've explored, as an idea, or?
No, I had a look I know that there is a revision ongoing, and that there are some comments that we want to do as TEDD network, but I've not considered to be part of the expert panel. If there is a room for do it, it will be with a pleasure, because I think that since I'm developing the guide for the Council of Europe, I have in mind the principle and interpretation of the principle. And I think also that the harmonization of documents is one of the main important objectives when we work, because otherwise we produce a lot of guidelines, and in a way there is not a harmonized interpretation of the guidelines. And I think that if we want to work in an efficient way for stakeholders that are involved in research, we need to have a normalized approach. So that's for sure. So I can present some comments, I will do it, but if there is a room to participate in the stakeholders group, I'm open to this option as well.
That's quite a good comment. Thank you. Thank you, Anna Grazia. Any other?
Yes, sorry.
Please, Karen, please.
Yes, I had questions and comments really. I think, I'm a PBPK modeler, and I think, a lot of, obviously, Alice talked about verifying PBPK models and everything, and, and there is that side of it. But I think one of the other things that, I've been focusing on the last year is trying to run workshops to make people aware of what modeling can do. But, we're talking about clinicians, because I think we have this problem, don't we, where, the models, especially, I think, as we start moving down into special populations, can be quite sophisticated, data intensive. And I think there's this perception that we're not there yet in terms of the data that are available. And I think that's wrong, really. We may not be there and have perfect models, but the point I'm trying to say is I think the models are good enough to be used at the moment and to help inform for these special populations. So as I said, I've been involved in an ASCPT workshop, the ESDPP, but basically it's trying to, educate, I think, clinicians about certainly those practicing clinicians who are less informed about modeling and trying to just educate them. So that's something I'm trying to do. It's not one of these big programs of work, but certainly, and I suppose my question to everyone here is, what more can we be doing? In terms of pharmacometrics, we talked about, obviously I'm talking about a quantitative aspect here. What more can we do? I mean, each of you come from different backgrounds, but how can we help move things forward and build that confidence?
So,
sorry, it's a very good question, and knowing the colleagues, in the panel, I would be pleased to hear, their view and reaction. Thank you. So, Felix, please.
Right, Karen, nice question. I think from the consulting side, especially on the Pharmacometrics, there's a lot that goes into getting, for instance, like, trying to convince a client the need to use like Pharmacometrics methods for what they are doing in their pediatric work. And so we play a big role in trying to convince the sponsors to try and use some of these modeling strategies, right? And then if you look at lately, a lot of PIPs and PSPs that we've seen, a lot of the methods for instance, trying to optimize the number of patients enrolled in the trials, trying to minimize the number of invasive procedures, right? I think a lot of some of the members have already talked about minimizing the number of blood draws. And in the long run, if you can convince them that this actually sometimes these designs actually reduce cost and give us more time effective studies, I think it's easier to get some of our sponsors on board. And so I think from those of us that are doing this, I think it's up to us to let the sponsors know how this will be very helpful to them, and of course helpful to the children too.
But the first thing that they're going to come back and say is, will the regulators accept this? And sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot there, Leila, but it is a common thing. If it isn't written down in paper for people to see, there is always that resistance.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I think, right, as we're working on this new PK and pregnancy guidance, I think that hopefully when it publishes, that there will be, strengthened language related to the utility of PBPK modeling. So I hope that makes you feel better, Karen.
Yeah, and if I remember well, the FDA is used to review regularly PBPK work. So I remember seeing this, more than once. As I told you, I'm not at all a specialist in the domain. I've always been, curious of it. I've had the opportunity to work with, specialists, including Amy Chung. At the time, she was my colleague at AstraZeneca. And then further to this, delighted to work with Jeff Barrett as well. And moving forward, there were, so nice paper published. And I remember, when working and discussing with them, they said, well, there's a need to have definitely the clinician in. And I remember years ago, when we initiated, interaction with the European Medicines Agency joint workshop, we also had interaction with the FDA. So clearly, yes, as a former regulator, I'm used to say, well, if you are not trying, you will never know. So have a talk to the regulators. And knowing what the FDA is doing, the EMA is doing, I think there's lots of hope, in the domain, and I'm sure we will succeed. And having, this the topic of pregnant and breastfeeding individuals at ICH again, this will be part of the discussion.
So, Karen, I had a question. Was it mostly related to PPK, or was almost every modeling approach?
No, just modeling approaches in general, because I mean, neither, I think, we should be thinking about all the modeling approaches that we can use. But it's just, still, I think, I think with special populations, there is a resistance, I think, to use modeling, not just PBPK, but in general. Mm-hmm. And I think that's my concern, is how do we better, educate people about, the perception, because there is a perception, I think, that the regulators won't accept it, or, are less inclined to accept it. And so how do we go about convincing everyone? It's not just the regulators, industry, but also practitioners as well.
Can I answer? Can I say something in my perspective?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not expert at all in this field, and I'm a lawyer as background, but working in this field since a long time, I can say that what is very important is to build trust, and to create a partnership between patients and researcher. And to do it, educational activities, training, and initiatives aimed at increasing the awareness of some important topics need to be developed. And for children, it should be done for children with a participatory methodology, and it should be adapted for children. This means that it takes a long time, that's for sure. A lot of energy, that's for sure. But I think that investment in long term could have an important impact to foster research and to increase the trust in what you are doing. That is an important point for me, because if they understand better, they can participate in a way. They can support your decision, and they can support the research. And this is very important for me. What the work we done, for example, for what I mentioned in my presentation regarding the assent form we developed for the European Reference Network for Rare Diseases. We developed some assent form for children, developed with participatory methodology. What it was interesting, for example, it appeared that children, we asked them to sign or to give their assent for using their data for research. What it was interesting, when we asked at the beginning of the work, do you know what is an European reference network? Do you know what is a registries? Do you know how are used data? Nobody knows. And there were children with rare diseases that are supposed to be part of European reference network. So this is the first important information that I got. And I said, we need to change this, because otherwise we cannot ask them just to say yes to do it, to yes, you can do it, no, you can do it, without appreciating if they know and if they trust in the system, in the results, etc. The work carried out by Solange and the European Forum on Clinical Practice is about lay summaries for children on the results of clinical trials is an important and a great work. And this is a part of this approach to inform people, to increase the awareness of people, of patients and children in adapted way, with adapted tools, to increase trust and then to foster research. This is my consideration. That is not linked really on the medical or scientific approach, but really in the, I can say, civil society implication in research, especially if we want to face the innovation for research.
Thank you, Anna Grazia. Very good comments. So prior to wrapping up, knowing we are at time now. Let's hear Mark Turner. Mark, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I'm a clinician, and we had a great workshop at ESDP from Certara. It was fantastic. The pharmacometricians and the PD experts all understood it, but if I was to tell my clinical colleagues what it was all about, then it would have been very difficult. And I think for clinicians, people who have a medical degree or a nursing degree who may have done some pharmacology 5, 10, 20 years ago, we need to follow the same approach as Anna Gracia just outlined for the children. We need to start off with the understanding that people have, simplify everything to their terms, rather than the high-powered explanations that were so fantastic for the pharmacologists. But it needs to be a different take for exactly the same reasons as Anna Gracia outlined.
Thank you, Mark. So I guess, John, you are on the same page as Mark, right?
Not completely on the same page, but almost. I think
almost.
In addition to what Mark mentioned, I fully support that. But in addition to that, you need to have champions in different locations across the globe that work together. So we have a team that consists of people who know about pharmacology, pharmacometricians, clinical trial experts, and that's the way to move along, because you need to start respecting each other and trusting each other and make it and understand the language we all speak. And I think that's, for me, in addition to what Mark rightfully mentioned, key. And because when you have a champion in different locations, the translation will come. But it takes time, and that's in addition what, of course, was mentioned about getting the trust of the patients. And that is probably going to be easier with pregnant individuals than with children, but that's another chapter.
Great comment. Thank you so much, John. And now, as you heard, it's time to, end our discussion. So I'd like to thank you. This was a great discussion, great presentation, fantastic symposium. So just to mention that, the focus these days is more than ever on pediatrics, rare diseases, and now on pregnant and breastfeeding individuals. And of course, they do have lots in common, knowing that more and more there's the value to be together, to work collaboratively, to connect the dots, to use, all the good work which is done here and there. And definitely, I'm quite optimistic with regard to the near future, knowing that all of us having, different expertise, but the same willingness to see things changing, then I'm sure that, we will be successful. So thank you so much. And I'd like as well to thank Certara and also the attendees to this symposium. With that said, I wish you a very nice weekend, a well-deserved weekend, with, of course, I'm sure the opportunity to, keep the momentum on those very important topics. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you to you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.